Have you ever felt completely exhausted, even on a day when your body did very little? Not the kind of tiredness that comes from effort, but the quiet heaviness that lingers, even when everything around you is still. If you have ever sat in a silent room and wondered, why do I feel so tired when nothing is wrong? Then this moment we are about to share may feel strangely familiar. In our younger years, we were taught that exhaustion comes from work. But as life unfolds, many discover another truth. Sometimes it is not the body that is tired. It is the mind, still holding conversations that ended years ago, still carrying expectations that were never fulfilled, still replaying memories that quietly ask for our attention. Here at Son.Mindfulness, we often explore a gentle shift that few people are ever taught. Aging is not simply a loss of strength. It is an invitation to set down what was never meant to be carried forever. In this reflection, we will look together, calmly, honestly, at why silence can become a source of strength, why you no longer need to explain your life to everyone around you, and how releasing invisible emotional burdens may restore a peace you may not have felt in many years. There is nothing here you must believe, only something you may recognize. So let me ask you again slowly this time. Have you ever felt exhausted, even on a day when you did almost nothing at all? Part 1. The quiet exhaustion. Have you ever felt exhausted, even on a day when you did almost nothing? I am not speaking about the kind of tiredness that comes after a long walk or a day spent working with your hands. I am speaking of another kind, the quiet exhaustion that settles in your chest when the house is finally still. You sit down, nothing urgent remains, and yet your body feels heavy. Your mind refuses to rest. Have you ever noticed that? A gentleman I once spoke with, he was in his early 70s, told me something that stayed with me. He said, "I don't understand it. I'm retired now. My schedule is lighter than ever, but I feel more tired than when I worked 40 years straight." And when we sat together a little longer, it became clear. His body was resting, but his mind was still carrying decades of unfinished conversations. Memories replayed themselves quietly. Things he wished he had said differently. Moments he wished had turned out another way. Expectations that were never fulfilled. Psychology has a simple phrase for this. They call it cognitive load, the invisible weight of thoughts we continue to carry long after the moment has passed. In Buddhist understanding, we might call it attachment. Different words, same experience. You see, exhaustion in later life is often not a sign of weakness. It is often the result of a mind that has been strong for too long. Holding responsibilities, emotions, and silent worries that were never truly set down. And sometimes, the heaviest things we carry are not visible to anyone else, not even to those closest to us. So today, before we go any further, I want you to gently consider this with me. Is it possible that what you are feeling is not the weight of age, but the weight of everything you have carried without rest for many years? I leave that question with you for this moment. Part 2. The noise we carried for years. If we sit quietly long enough, something else begins to appear beneath that exhaustion. A kind of noise that has followed us for many years. Not the noise of traffic or television or conversation. I am speaking of the inner noise, the quiet pressure to respond, to explain, to justify ourselves. For most of our lives, many of us were taught, sometimes gently, sometimes firmly, that being a good person meant being available to everything. Available to every request, every expectation, every misunderstanding. So we learned to explain. We explained our choices to our parents, later to our partners, later still to our children. Why we worked so much. Why we worried so deeply. why we made the decisions we did with the limited understanding we had at the time. And somewhere along the way, without even noticing, life became a constant act of response. Have you ever felt that? As if you spent decades not simply living but reacting. Reacting to opinions, reacting to criticism, reacting to expectations that were never spoken clearly, yet somehow always present. A woman once shared with me, she was nearly 80, that the most exhausting part of her life was not raising 3 children alone. It was the quiet, lifelong feeling that she had to prove she had done enough. Psychology tells us that the human nervous system becomes conditioned to approval. We begin to measure safety by how well we meet the expectations around us. But Buddhist teaching gently reminds us, when the mind is constantly seeking validation, it rarely experiences peace. And so we carried this invisible noise, the need to be understood, the need to be seen as good enough, the need to show that our sacrifices had meaning. No wonder the mind grows tired, because living reactively is living without rest. So let me ask you something, not as a teacher above you, but as someone who is also still learning. How much of your life was truly chosen, and how much was quietly shaped by the expectations you felt you had to meet? Part 3. Silence as Strength. Now, after we begin to see how much noise we have carried, another possibility quietly appears before us. What if peace does not come from saying more, but from needing to say less? Many people, especially in earlier years, learn to fear silence. Silence can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like losing ground. It can even feel like weakness. I remember a man telling me once, "If I don't defend myself, people will think I have nothing to say." Perhaps you have felt something similar. But there is a kind of silence that is not emptiness. In the Buddhist tradition, it is often called noble silence. Not the silence of avoidance, not the silence of suppression. It is the silence that comes when the heart no longer needs to fight every misunderstanding. When someone speaks harshly, and you notice you no longer feel the urge to respond immediately. Not because you have no truth, but because your peace is no longer negotiable. Psychology offers an interesting insight here. Every emotional reaction, especially defensiveness, activates the body's stress response. The heart rate rises, muscles tighten, energy is spent, and when this happens repeatedly, day after day, year after year, the nervous system becomes exhausted. But when we choose silence consciously, not passively, but with awareness, something very different occurs. The body softens, the breath deepens. Energy that would have been lost in argument is quietly preserved. You begin to realize something almost surprising. You do not need to win every conversation to remain whole. You do not need to correct every misunderstanding to live with dignity. In fact, sometimes the strongest position is the one that does not need to defend itself at all. As we grow older, energy becomes more precious than being right. And noble silence becomes less about withdrawal and more about wisdom. So I invite you to sit with this gently. In your life today, how many words are spoken from habit, and how many could be released, allowing your peace to remain untouched? Part 4. Invisible Emotional Contract. As silence begins to reveal what we have been carrying, another layer often comes into view, one that is far more tender. It is the quiet weight of expectations. Not the expectations others clearly promise to fulfill, but the ones we created silently in our own hearts. Over the years, many of us gave deeply. We worked long hours, we sacrificed comfort, we postponed our own rest so that someone else might have a better chance. Especially as parents, especially as partners. And without ever speaking it aloud, a small human hope took root. Perhaps one day they will understand. Perhaps one day they will see how much I gave. Have you ever felt that? A woman I once listened to, she had raised her family through years of financial struggle, told me something with tears in her eyes. "I never needed repayment," she said. "I just thought they would remember." That sentence carries more truth than many long explanations. Psychology recognizes this as unspoken expectation, a natural emotional contract the mind creates when we invest our love and effort. But Buddhist teaching gently shows us something even deeper. When giving is tied, however quietly, to the hope of recognition, suffering begins to grow beneath the surface. Not loudly, but slowly. Expectation becomes a hidden thread that tightens each time appreciation does not arrive in the way we imagined. And here is the difficult compassion we must offer ourselves. Many of the contracts that have weighed on our hearts were never signed by anyone else. They existed only within our longing to be seen. This does not mean our sacrifices were meaningless. It means our kindness was real, but the debt we believed was owed may never have been promised. When we begin to release these invisible agreements, something softens. Resentment loosens its grip. The past loses some of its sharp edges, and love, without transaction, becomes lighter to carry. So I want to leave you with a gentle reflection today. Is there a quiet expectation you've been holding for many years that your heart might finally be ready to set down? Part 5. Stop explaining yourself. There comes a moment, often later than we expect, when we begin to see how much of our life was spent trying to be understood. We explained our choices, we explained our mistakes, we explained our intentions, again and again, hoping that if we said it clearly enough, someone would finally see us as we truly are. Have you ever noticed how tiring that becomes? I remember speaking with a retired teacher. He had spent nearly 40 years guiding young minds. And yet he confessed that the most exhausting habit he carried into his 70s was this quiet need to justify every decision he made. If a family member questioned him, he explained. If a neighbor misunderstood him, he clarified. If someone disagreed, he defended. Not out of pride, but out of a lifelong pattern of responsibility. Psychology tells us that when we are repeatedly placed in situations where approval feels conditional, the mind learns to protect itself by over-explaining. We begin to believe that peace comes from being correctly interpreted. But life, as you have surely seen by now, does not always offer that. Not everyone is listening with the intention to understand. Some have already decided who we are, long before we speak. And here is a quiet liberation that often arrives with maturity. You do not need every person to understand your story. You do not need to defend your past in order for your life to remain meaningful. This is not indifference. It is discernment. It is choosing where your voice is truly needed, and where silence protects your dignity. When we stop explaining ourselves to those who are not prepared to hear, something remarkable happens. The body relaxes. The mind stops rehearsing old conversations. Energy returns, energy that was once spent proving that we were enough. And perhaps, for the first time in many years, you begin to live without the constant posture of defense. So I leave you with this to carry into the rest of your day. In which moments are you still trying to be understood, when your peace might be better served by simply letting your life speak for itself? Part 6. Making peace with the past. There's one place we cannot walk away from, no matter how quiet our life becomes: the past. Not the past as a story we tell others, but the past as it lives inside us. Sometimes it visits in the evening when the house is still. A memory appears, uninvited, a moment we wish we had handled differently, a conversation we replay with new words that came too late, a decision made under pressure that we still question years later. Have you ever found yourself doing that? sitting quietly, yet somewhere inside an old scene begins playing again. A gentleman once told me, with a soft voice, "I have forgiven many people in my life, but I still don't know how to forgive myself." That sentence carries a kind of pain that is very common and rarely spoken. Psychology now tells us that the brain is wired to remember mistakes more vividly than successes. It is a survival mechanism. But over time, this can become a quiet form of self-punishment. Buddhist teaching offers another way to meet these memories, not by erasing them, but by meeting them without judgment. I would like to invite you, if you feel comfortable, to try something simple, either now or later today. Stand in front of a mirror, not to examine the lines on your face, but to meet the person who has carried your entire life. Look gently into your own eyes. And, if the words come, say this: "I did the best I could with what I understood at the time." Not as an excuse, but as an honest recognition of your humanity. You were not given perfect knowledge in those moments. You were given only the awareness you had then. When we speak to ourselves with this kind of compassion, something begins to soften. The body releases tension it has held for years. The mind loosens its grip on old judgments. Forgiveness, in this sense, is not forgetting. It is allowing the past to rest without requiring yourself to suffer again each time it appears. I will admit something to you as someone still learning this path. There are memories I am still making peace with, even now. And perhaps that is not failure. Perhaps that is simply the work of being human. So I leave you with this gentle invitation tonight. If you were to meet your younger self face to face, could you offer them the same understanding you so freely give to others? Part 7. The Golden Pause. Before we continue any further, I would like to invite you into a small moment together. Nothing complicated, just a pause. If you are able, gently let your shoulders drop a little. There's no need to sit perfectly, just allow your body to rest as it is. Now take a slow breath in through your nose, not a forced breath, just a natural, unhurried inhale. And then, let it leave your body softly. You may notice that the mind still wants to move. That is perfectly all right. We are not trying to stop thought. We are simply creating a little space around it. I often remind people, especially those who have spent a lifetime caring for others, that the nervous system does not reset through effort. It resets through permission. So again, one gentle breath in and a longer breath out. As you exhale, see if you can allow the muscles around your eyes, your jaw, your neck, to loosen just a little. There's nothing you need to solve in this moment. No conversation to revisit, no memory to correct, just this breath. Modern research shows that even 30 seconds of slow breathing can begin to calm the body's stress response. But long before science named it, contemplative traditions understood this simple truth. Stillness is not wasted time. It is restoration. If your mind wandered during these few breaths, please do not judge that. Wandering is what minds do. Returning gently is the practice. And perhaps you can notice now, even in this short pause, has something inside you softened, even slightly? As we move forward, I leave you with this small reminder to carry. How often in your day do you allow yourself a moment where nothing is required except one honest breath? Part 8. Impermanence brings hope. As we sit with that small moment of stillness, something else often becomes easier to see. Life does not hold any feeling forever. Not the joyful ones, and not the painful ones either. There is a quiet relief in remembering this. In earlier years, difficult emotions can feel permanent. A disappointment feels endless. A loss feels like it has no horizon. But with time, and perhaps you have noticed this yourself, every experience, no matter how intense, eventually changes its shape. A grief that once felt overwhelming becomes a softer ache. A regret that once kept us awake at night becomes a memory we can hold without breaking. Buddhist teaching describes this simply: impermanence is not something to fear. It is the very condition that allows healing to exist. If nothing changed, pain would never loosen its grip. Psychology echoes this in its own language. Emotions, when not resisted or suppressed, naturally move through cycles. They rise, they peak, and then, given space, they settle. I sometimes ask people to imagine the ocean. Even the strongest wave cannot remain at its highest point for long. It must fall. So must sorrow, so must tension, and so must the heavy thoughts that visit us from time to time. Aging in this light is not simply the passing of years. It is refinement. We begin to recognize patterns. We begin to trust that storms, even very personal ones, do not last forever. And this recognition brings something very gentle yet very powerful: hope without illusion. Not the hope that life will never be difficult again, but the quiet confidence that whatever arises will also move. So I invite you to consider this as you reflect on your own journey. Is there a feeling you are holding today that perhaps is already beginning, very slowly, to change? Part 9. Becoming your own companion. There is another quiet change that often arrives in the later chapters of life, and it is one that many people fear before they ever experience it. The space around us begins to open. Schedules that were once full become lighter. Children grow into their own lives. Friends move away, or sometimes move on in ways we cannot follow just yet. And in those moments, a word often appears that carries a heavy feeling: loneliness. But I would like to offer you another way of seeing this space. What if some of what we call loneliness is actually an invitation? An invitation to meet someone we have spent most of our life overlooking: ourselves. A gentleman once shared with me, after the passing of his lifelong partner, that the quiet evenings in his home felt unbearable at first. Every sound seemed too loud, every room too empty. But over time, something unexpected happened. He began to sit by the window at sunset, not waiting for anything, not distracting himself with constant noise, just watching the light change across the sky. And one day he told me, with a gentle smile, I realized I wasn't alone in the house. I had simply never learned how to be with myself before. Psychology speaks about the importance of developing an internal secure base, a sense of companionship that does not depend entirely on external presence. Buddhist practice has long encouraged this same intimacy with one's own mind. When we stop running from our own thoughts, when we allow quiet without immediately filling it, a subtle friendship begins to form. You begin to enjoy simple things again. A slow walk without destination, a cup of tea without interruption, a moment of reflection without needing approval. Solitude then is no longer emptiness. It becomes space, space where your own presence is enough. And perhaps this is one of the most healing realizations of all. You were never truly abandoned by life. You were simply being invited into a deeper relationship with the one person who has been with you through every season. So I leave you with this gentle question to carry tonight. When you sit in silence, do you feel alone? Or might you be slowly discovering the quiet comfort of your own company? Part 10. Closing. As we come to the end of this reflection together, I would like you to pause for just a moment and notice something very simple. You have made it here. Through every season that shaped you, through years that asked more from you than anyone else may ever fully understand. And still, you are here. Not perfect, not finished, but present. For much of life we are quietly taught that our worth must be earned, that we must produce, provide, explain, fix, respond. But there comes a time, often later than expected, when a gentler truth begins to reveal itself. You were never required to prove your value in order to possess it. You are not valuable because of how much you do. You are valuable because you exist, just as you are. Silence, then, is not emptiness. It is not withdrawal. It is freedom. Freedom from the endless need to justify your life to those who cannot see your journey. Freedom from conversations that only drain what remains sacred within you. Freedom to sit, to breathe, to simply be. At Son.Mindfulness, we often return to a quiet reminder. We do not stop the river. We learn to row with it. Life continues to move, with or without our resistance. But when we move with it, instead of against it, even uncertainty becomes something we can navigate with dignity. If something in today's reflection resonated with you, I gently invite you to share your thoughts below. What has silence taught you in your own life? And if you feel that these moments of stillness are helpful, you are always welcome to continue this journey with us here. For now, take one more slow breath and carry this with you into the rest of your day. If nothing else changes, can you allow yourself to remember that who you are in this quiet moment is already enough?